Hello, everyone. Hi, and welcome to a new session. And in this session, here with me is Ananya.
Hello everyone.
So, Ananya, what are we doing today?
So we will continue with our RPSC crash course, and today is day 4, and we have done 3 videos before. If you haven't seen them, you can check them out, and we should begin our practice today.
Yes. Okay. So, here we are with our RPSC crash course, and it's day 4. So, let's move on to the first question. Yeah.
Greenblatt's Renaissance self-fashioning was published in the year dash. Is it 1990, 1980, 1979, or 1977? Stephen Greenblatt's Renaissance Self-Fashioning was the work. You have to tell which year was it published in.
Yes. So, self-fashioning. This term itself was introduced by Stephen Greenblatt in his 1980 book, Renaissance Self-Fashioning from Moore to Shakespeare. And this title itself refers to the process of constructing one's identity and public persona to reflect a set of cultural standards or social codes. And this text is considered to have inaugurated this theory, this school of theory called New Historicism, right? So this work was published in 1980. Greenblatt's Renaissance Self-Fashioning from Moore to Shakespeare. Okay, next question.
Which among the following is not a Manavaka novel by Margaret Lawrence? Is it The Stone Angel, A Jest of God, The Fire Dwellers, or As for Me and My House? You have to tell which is not a Manavaka novel series by Margaret Lawrence.
So Manawaka, it's a fictional town in the Canadian province of Manitoba, and this Manawaka has frequently been used as a setting in the novels and short stories by Margaret Lawrence. The Manawaka sequence consists of the books The Stone Angel, A Jest of God, The Fire Dwellers, A Bird in the House, and The Diviners. So, this last option, As for Me and My House, it's not a novel by Lawrence. It doesn't even belong to the Manawaka sequence. It's a novel by Sinclair Ross. So it's the odd one out. It's not a Manawaka novel by Margaret Lawrence. And the Manawaka novels are which ones? The Stone Angel, A Jest of God, The Fire Dwellers, A Bird in the House, and The Diviners. Okay, next. Yeah.
Which novel among the following shows the disastrous consequences of the inhuman foster care system and residential schooling? Is it The Gunny Sack, In Search of April Raintree, Family Matters, or none of the above? You have to tell which novel shows the disastrous consequences of inhuman foster care system and residential schooling.
It is the novel In Search of April Raintree by Beatrice Scarleton. Here, two young sisters are taken from their home and family. Powerless to change their fortunes, they are separated and each put into different foster homes. Yet over the years, the bond between them grows as they each make their way in a society that is at times indifferent, hostile, and violent. One embraces her metis identity while the other tries to leave it behind. In the end, out of tragedy comes an unexpected legacy of triumph and reclamation. So it's a novel In Search of April Raintree by Beatrice Scarleton, a very important novel from Canadian literature. Okay, next.
A Year of Last Things Poems is a poetry collection published in 2024 by Dash. Is it Mariah Campbell, Michael Ondaatje, Rohinton Mystery, or Thomas King?
Okay, so A Year of Last Things, Poems. That's the title. So it's a poetry collection published in this year itself. And it's a poetry collection by the very famous writer Who wrote The English Patient? It is Michael Ondaatje. It's a very recent poetry collection by Michael Ondaatje. Year of Last Things Poems. Okay, next.
Survival, a thematic guide to Canadian literature, is a work by Dash. Is it Margaret Atwood, Robertson Davies, Jan Martel, or none of the above? Survival, a thematic guide to Canadian literature. You have to tell who is this by.
So Survival, a thematic guide to Canadian literature. It's a survey of Canadian literature by Margaret Atwood, one of the best known Canadian authors. It was first published by House of Anansi in 1972. So please remember the years as well. Okay. So Survival, a thematic guide to Canadian literature by Margaret Atwood, published in 1972. Because these days chronology questions are a reg. So you may get at least 3 or 4 or 5 chronology questions in the exam. So be very careful about the years. Okay. Next.
Writing Degree Zero by Roland Barthes was published in Dash. Is it 1950, 1953, 1958, or none of the above? Writing Degree Zero is the work's name. It's by Roland Barthes. You have to tell the publishing year.
First of all, Roland Barthes is going to be a very important writer for any exam. His concepts, his works of criticism, all of his books, the years are very important. You can get them as match the following or just a question or, pick the odd one out or like that. So Writing Degree Zero, it's a book of literary criticism by Roland Barthes. First published in 1953. It was Barthes' first full-length book and was intended as Birthrights in the introduction as no more than an introduction to what a history of writing might be. So this work is like a history to writing itself. And it was published in 1953. Writing Degree Zero, 1953 by Roland Barthes. Okay, next.
Who proposed the idea that the mind at the time of birth is like a blank slate or tabula rasa? Is it John Locke, J.S. Mill, Bertrand Russell, or Francis Bacon?
Okay. So it was the empiricist philosopher John Locke who coined this idea of the tabula rasa, which means that at the time of our birth, our minds are like blank slates, okay, with no innate ideas. Because he was an empiricist philosopher, he believed that experience is the sole source of knowledge. So as we grow up, as we gather experiences, we gain knowledge. That's what he believed, being an empiricist philosopher that he was. So this idea of the tabula rasa was propounded by him, by John Locke, and his most important work was an essay concerning human understanding, which was published in 1690. Be very careful about the years. Many questions can come from the years, and don't lose marks because of this chronology questions. Okay, next. Yeah. Oh,
Arrange correct chronological
wait.
sequence.
I got messed up with the slides. Wait. Yeah.
Yeah. Arrange the correct chronological sequence in which the following texts were published. First is Test of the Tubervilles, The Old Wide Way, The Time Machine, and A Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man. You have to set the chronology of these texts in which they were published.
Okay, so let's look at the correct answer. So the chronology will be A. So first we have Test of the Village. It was published in 1891. Then we will have The Time Machine by H.G. Wells. Then Kim by Rudyard Kipling. Then we will have The Old Wives' Tale. Then A, then D, then B, then C, lastly E. A Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man by James Joyce. So that will be the correct chronology of these novels. Tess, The Time Machine, Kim, The Old Wives' Tale, and lastly, James Joyce's A Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man. Okay, next.
Thomas Love Peacock authored the essay Revolt. Which essay has the author? Revolt of the Tartars, an essay on the principles of human action, Four Ages of Poetry, or Seven Lamps of Architecture. Thomas Love Peacock has authored one of the following essays. You have to tell which one.
Yes. So the Four Ages of Poetry, an essay of 1820 by Thomas Love Peacock, was both a significant study of poetry in its own right and the stimulus for defense of poetry by Shelley. So, Four Ages of Poetry by Thomas Love Peacock, published in 1820. Published in 1820. Okay, next.
The name of the goddess in Kanthapura is dash. Is it Kenchamma, Akayya, Narsiga, or Tiruchengode? Name of the goddess in the novel Kanthapura, you have to tell.
So Kanthapura was the novel by Raja Rao. It was published in 1938, set against the backdrop of the India which was struggling against the British rule. And in this novel, we see that we have this Devi, right? She's the goddess, and she's called Kenchamma. Kenchamma is the goddess of Kanthapura, 1938, Raja Rao. Okay. So before we proceed, we would just like to inform you that we are organizing an FDP on empowering educators, translating NEP 2020 into actionable strategies for higher education. It will be a fully online program starting from May 12th to 19th. And there is a special May Day offer going on of ₹1,000 only. And this offer will be valid till May 7th. So there is this number on the screen where you can contact for your further queries and get registered for this program. Okay, next. Yeah.
An account of the life of Mr. Richard Savage, son of the Earl Rivers, 1744, was the first major biography published by either of the following writers. Is it Alexander Pope, Joseph Addison, Samuel Johnson, or James Boswell?
Okay. So, an account of the life of Mr. Richard Savage, son of the early rivers. It was the first major biography which was published by Samuel Johnson. It was published by Samuel Johnson. It was released anonymously and it details the life of Richard Savage, a London poet and friend of Johnson who had died in 1743. So an account of the life of Mr. Richard Savage, son of the early rivers. It's a major biography by Samuel Johnson, 1744. Okay. Next.
Francis Bacon's The Advancement of Learning was dedicated to King James I, King Henry IV, King Richard II, or Queen Elizabeth I. Francis Bacon's The Advancement of Learning, who was it dedicated to?
So Francis Bacon's major work, The Advancement of Learning, it was dedicated to King James I. It was dedicated to King James I. This book was published in 1605 and it inspired the taxonomic structure of the highly influential encyclopedia by Jean-Léon Alembert and Denis Diderot, and is credited by Francis Bacon's biographer essayist Catherine Drinker Bowen with being a pioneering essay in support of empirical philosophy. So this work, The Advancement of Learning, it is a major work of empiricist philosophy by Bacon, published in 1605, and it was dedicated to the ruling king, King James I. Because remember, Bacon was a major writer of the Jacobean period. Okay. Next.
Which among the following Is a Horatian ode by Thomas Gray? Is it elegy written in a country churchyard? Ode on a distant prospect of Eton College? The Fatal Sisters? Or none of the above? You have to tell which is the Horatian ode by Thomas Gray.
The Ode on a Distant Prospect of Eton College. It's an Horatian ode by Thomas Gray. It is composed of 10-line stanzas rhyming A, B, A, B, C, C, D, E, E, D. Okay. And in this poem, Gray coined the phrase ignorance is bliss. Ode on a Distant Prospect of Eton College. Thomas Gray, again, a very important transitional poet. He wrote pastoral elegies, Horatian odes, mock heroic poems. So he was a very important figure of the contemporary time, right? So do look up his works and be very careful again about the chronology. Okay, next.
Which of the following is not true about lyrical ballads? It is a manifesto of romantic poetry. It turns English poetry away from the social and intellectual sophistication of the 17th and the 18th century poetry. It takes poetry out of the confines of reason and intellect to the unravished and unspoiled beauties of nature. It is very particular about the form and structure of a poem. You have to tell what is not true about lyrical ballads.
Okay. So as you all know, lyrical ballads with a few other poems. It was a set of experimental poems which was brought out by Wordsworth and Coleridge in 1798. And it was indeed a manifesto of romantic poetry. It indeed was a revolt against the literary conventions of the neoclassical era. It indeed talked about the unravished and unspoiled beauties of nature. So all the first three options are correct, but the last option is wrong. It was not particular about the form and structure of a poem. So option D is not true. The first three options are absolutely correct. Okay, next.
Identify the one that has not been paired correctly. Is it Criticism in Wilderness with Jeffrey Hartman, Madness and Civilization by Roland Barthes, Poetry and Repression by Harold Bloom, or Strangers to Ourselves, Julia Kristeva? You have to tell which pair is not the correct one.
So Criticism in Wilderness it's indeed a work by the Yale critic Geoffrey Hartman. Roland Barthes wrote Madness and Civilization, did he? Poetry and Repression by Harold Bloom, yes. Strangers to Ourselves, Julia Kristeva, yes. But Madness and Civilization is a work by Foucault. It's not by Roland Barthes, so it's wrong. Madness and Civilization by Michel Foucault. Okay, next.
Which among the following group of writers is labeled as university wits? Is it Thomas Lodge, Thomas Wilson, Walter Raleigh, John Fletcher, Ben Jonson, George Peele, Thomas Kidd, Francis Beaumont, and John Lilly, or Christopher Marlowe, Robert Greene, and Thomas Nash? You have to tell which group of writers is labeled as university wits.
Okay. So option D is correct. Christopher Marlowe, Robert Greene, and Thomas Nash. They were the university wits. Okay. So before we wrap up, we would just like to remind you that from May 12 to 19, there would be an FDP on empowering educators, translating NEP 2020 into actionable strategies for the higher education. So a media offer is going on presently of ₹1,000 only, and it will be valid till May 7th. So you can register now and get advantages of this special offer. And there is also this number on the screen where you can contact for your further doubts and queries and get enrolled for this program. All right, so that's all for tonight. So Ananya, shall we wrap up?
Yes, with that extensive practice, you can definitely wrap up.
Okay. So all right, guys. So we will see you again tomorrow.